You ever wonder if a machine can have a soul? It's a wild thought, right? Well, today we're going to dive into how the raw physics of this massive instrument, the North German organ, and even the stone cathedrals that house them, didn't just play music. No, they actually gave birth to a whole new revolutionary style. So, how on earth does a machine made of wood, metal, and stone get a soul? Let's dig in and find out. Okay, so the music from this era, it's all built on this really fascinating paradox. On one hand, you've got this just immense, unstoppable power. But on the other, there's this wild, almost chaotic freedom, like pure improvisation. So you have to ask, right? How can those two things possibly exist at the same time? Well, the answer? It's actually in the machine itself. Just think about it for a second. A singer, they've got to take a breath. A violinist, they have to change the direction of their bow. Their sound has a limit, it's finite. But the pipe organ, oh, it's a completely different beast. It basically has infinite lungs. I mean, for all intents and purposes, as long as you're feeding it air, it can hold a single note forever. It just doesn't get tired. And here's the absolute key physical difference. You hit a piano key, right? The sound is percussive. It's loudest the moment you strike it, and then it immediately starts to fade away. But the organ, that's a sustained system. The sound stays at full, constant power for as long as your finger is on that key. And trust me, that's not just a small detail. It changes everything about the kind of music you can make. So what's the engine powering this incredible, infinite sound? Well, it all comes down to the physics of wind and this idea of a constant pressure system. Okay, you can really see how it all works here. You've got these huge bellows feeding air into what's called a wind chest. And that wind chest, it's like a reservoir, holding the air at a constant pressure. So as long as someone is pumping those bellows, the pipes get this perfectly steady, unwavering stream of air. The sound doesn't dip, it doesn't waver, it's just absolute. And you have to understand, this physical reality completely changed how composers thought about music. Suddenly, they weren't limited by a human's lung capacity anymore. They realized they weren't just writing little melodies. No, they were becoming architects of sound. They were literally sculpting these huge columns of air. All right, so that's the engine. Now let's move on to the organ's physical layout, because its very structure became a tool for composers, and this brings us to something called the Werkprinzip. The Werkprinzip, which basically means work principle, is this really cool idea that an organ isn't just one single giant instrument. It's actually more like a collection of separate, smaller instruments all in one place. You've got the Hauptwerk, that's the main event. Then there's the Rückpositive, a smaller one that sits behind the organist. And then you have these huge pedal towers on the sides. The key thing is, each one is its own thing, physically separate in space. So what do you think composers did with this setup? You guessed it, they totally exploited it. They started writing these things called echo fantasias. A musical phrase would be played on the big, main Hauptwerk, and then it would be answered by the soft, delicate echo from the distant Rückpositive. It was like a literal conversation happening in space, built right into the instrument's design. How cool is that? But okay, all this clever spatial back and forth is amazing. But the true heart of the North German sound, it's way down at the foundation. We have to talk about the absolute leviathan in the room, the pedal division. I mean, we're talking about pipes that are up to 32 feet long. These things are giants. They produce frequencies so low, you don't just hear them with your ears, you feel them vibrating in your chest. This creates this incredibly stable, powerful harmonic foundation, an anchor of sound that is physically unshakable. And that is the famous pedal point. And right here, this is where that whole paradox we talked about gets solved. It's this immovable, rock-solid base foundation that gave composers the freedom to let absolute chaos and creativity flourish up top. With that pedal point holding everything down, the composer could just unleash the stylus fantasticus, which literally means the fantastic style. We're talking wild runs, crazy harmonies, improvisational flourishes, all of it. The machine provides the anchor for the fantasy. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because the instrument doesn't actually end with the pipes. We need to think about its final, and maybe its largest component, the room itself. So you've got to picture these North German cathedrals. They're built of hard brick, tons of stone. Acoustically, they're basically giant echo chambers. So the building wasn't just a box to hold the music, no. It became an active part of the instrument. It was the final resonator, shaping every single note that was played. So just how much of a participant are we talking about? Get this. A single note played in one of these cathedrals could take up to 7 seconds to completely fade away. Just try to imagine that, a 7-second echo. For a composer, that's both an amazing tool and a huge, huge challenge. I mean, if you try to play really fast, complicated stuff in a room like that, what do you get? A big, muddy, unintelligible blur of sound. So what did they do? They got smart. They composed for the decay. They started using deliberate silences and these long, sustained chords. They wrote music that literally gave the room time to finish one chord before the next one started. The physics of the room was actually dictating the rhythm of the music itself. So let's bring all these pieces together. What we're really seeing here is this powerful, incredible theme, artistic freedom being born directly out of physical limitations. And when you look at it this way, the whole North German style starts to feel, well, almost inevitable. Think about it. The physics of pressurized air, that leads you to infinite sustain. The physical separation of the Werkprinzip, that gives you these incredible spatial echoes. And the crazy acoustics of the stone cathedrals, that forces you into a certain kind of harmonic pacing. The music was a direct, logical result of its physical environment. So the next time you happen to hear this kind of powerful music, just remember what it is you're really hearing. Yeah, you're hearing the genius of a composer like Buxtehude, of course. But you're also hearing the physics of compressed air. You're hearing the deep rumble of those massive wooden pedal towers and the slow, majestic echo of ancient stone. What you're hearing is a soulful machine that actually breathes. Because in the end, the physics of the instrument didn't just box the music in with a bunch of rules. No way. Instead, those very constraints are exactly what gave this music its unique and timeless soul. A soul that, kind of like the notes themselves, feels like it could just sustain forever. This breakdown was based on the work of Notes and Silences. Thanks so much for joining me.